Church, are we excited to be in the midst of God this morning? So, I'm about to do a poem that I titled, The Helper. It's on the Holy Spirit, because essentially that's the reason why we're here. In the book of Acts, we had the disciples, the early disciples had the experience of the Holy Spirit, and that experience remains the same till today. And that's all I'm going to speak about. Praise God. It was the crack of dawn. 120 people in the room just after the ascension of the sun, praying fervently with one heart and unity, awaiting the outpouring of the Spirit, the third person in the Trinity. While our friends feasted and drank outside, we waited with keen devotion, waiting for the outpouring, the manifestation of the one they said will come, the promise. The helper. Our hearts were open, our desires honest, our minds replaying the words of Jesus while he had lived among us. I will not leave you as orphans, I will come to you. And he had spoken about the comforter, but we didn't even have a clue how this person would look like, what he would wear, who he would be. And so it was unbelievable when we were moved by something that we couldn't see, and the force of a mighty rushing wind. We thought maybe the rains of Pentecost. Maybe a big storm has hit Jerusalem. Since we're indoors, the drizzles weren't going to reach us. But this was bigger than any storm we had ever known. This was different. It had the spirit of its own. It was when the fires sat on our heads and we began to speak in languages that we had never heard that we knew that this was not a storm. It was the promise. The one that we had been made by Jesus. The promise of the Spirit of Christ. The one who would guide us into all truth, the Spirit of life. And suddenly the greatest thing that ever happened to mankind, life could never be the same. The Holy Spirit had been given to all, both adult and child. And yet centuries later, we live powerless lives, toothless generations. We, God's creation, we are tossed to and fro by the gimmicks of the devil. When we have available the power of the Holy Spirit, we live in bondage to the power of sin, sinking deep in cesspits and laboring, flailing arms, helpless to the thing that besets us, when God by His Spirit has called us righteous and given us the helper to help our infirmities. But when His sweet voice whispers to us to have Him in, we rather listen to the principalities, shouting into our ears that we cannot break the chains of immorality, that our time is different, that it should not matter so much about chastity. As long as we go to church, are good people, and give to charity. And sometimes we try and try again by our strength to maintain purity of heart, of lips, of life. But we cannot. It's so frustrating. Yet our helper, our standby, is waiting, asking to be let in. My friend, I am the one that was sent as comforter and counselor, yet you are suffering from depression and each night crying behind your bathroom door. I am the intercessor. I pray for you before the Father every time to keep you from evil. But each time you slip back under the blanket of the devil, his lies coaxing and subtle, and he dangles you to and fro somewhere between hot and cold. That you that God said He will spew out of His mouth, you're like a Christian growing mold. Saved by God, yet a poor example of who a Christian should be. Struggling to live, struggling to breathe, struggling to break out of the bondage, and still not free. A member of God's army without an armory. Enormous power at your disposal, yet always feeble at the knee. I am the wind and the water. I am the dove, yet I am the fire. I am the oil upon your head. Why are you always bowed like you have no father? Why are you always looking defeated like you have no power? Sometimes I wonder if you remember the fires of the Passover, of 50 days after the Passover, as never went. If you know that the cloven tongues of fire that sat on heads now live in hearts of people who believe and do not doubt. I wonder if you know that the power of God that was available to heal the sick and to raise the dead, to bring down principalities and raise Christ's principles instead, to raise kingdoms with fire and to raise the kingdoms of our Messiah, to trample on serpents and snakes and to preach the gospel amidst oppression and hate is still within us. I want you to know that you are Christ's masterpiece, and he gave you his best gift, the promise of the Holy Spirit. And all you have to do is yield, not to the bondage and the yoke of demons, but to the glorious spirit of freedom. I can hear you crying now. I need the Holy Spirit to help me out. I want Jesus to give him to me. Oh, but he has been given that day in the room with the 120. And all he needs you to do, he released it so you can believe. And that includes you. But maybe you just never knew. And all he's asking you to do is to let him be your advocate, your paracletus. Can't you see? And he's always been there, just gently prodding. And all you need to do is to say, "Sweet Holy Spirit, welcome. Please come in." God bless you.
Holy Spirit, thou art welcome in this place. Holy Spirit, thou art welcome in this place. Omnipotent Father of mercy and grace, thou art welcome in this place. Holy Spirit, thou art welcome in this place. Holy Spirit, thou art welcome in this place. Omnipotent Father of mercy and grace, thou art welcome in. I've shared how I go to certain places, and when I go, some people walk up to me and say, "Hi, hello, Pastor Nat, how are you doing?" They really try to, start up a conversation, and they're looking at me like, "Oh, don't I know them?" And I'm trying to say, okay, I'm trying to picture, where or when I met them, and then they say to me, "Oh, I'm your friend on Facebook, on Instagram." And I'm wondering, I'm like, on Facebook I have like maybe 100,000 friends, and maybe on Instagram a few hundreds of thousands of people. But you see, that you're my friend on Facebook does not mean you are my friend. You are connected to me, one of my contacts. But what makes us friends indeed is that we have a relationship and we have communication. So you are my friend, but you are not my friend. Do you know that when you were born again, the Holy Spirit came to take residence inside of you? He wants to be your friend. But how well have you communicated with him? Today I believe that there will be a revolution in our lives that would revolutionize our lives forever. Very quickly, before I bring up the man of God, I'll just acknowledge some guests. I saw Myro and his wife who were here, they've gone. So we honor them even in their absence. We've got